Our starting times, so let's get rolling. I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items really quick. Some of you may already heard me say that, but we have all of the attendees on mute until about the last 10 minutes, in which we plan to open it up for Q&A. But just to cut down on background noise and confusion, currently only the panelists are allowed to talk. We are recording this session, and I will be publishing notes and any references afterwards. If there's any other follow-up, if we mention particular articles or anything, I'll send those out in an email afterwards. Just a couple of quick things before we get into the actual content. We have many guests here today. I'm Liz. I'm one of the co-founders of the Professional Independent Consultants of America, PICA. Basically, PICA is a membership organization to help people launch and build the consulting career of their dreams. We offer sessions like this, virtual roundtables, web workshops, coaching, office hours, connecting with fellow independent consultants through our community app, just a thriving community of self-employed independent professionals. So thanks for joining us today. Let's see. A little bit about me. I've been in consulting since the last century. I started my career at Price Waterhouse, which soon became PwC, which is where I met Donald Nagle. And then as good people tend to meet other good people, I was introduced to Briana Sharp, who's also a fellow consulting firm veteran. So actually, I'm going to read a little bit of bios here to introduce the two of you. So Briana, because you're at the top of my screen, I'm going to introduce you first. Briana's been in consulting over 15 years, and so she's quite experienced at managing expectations and establishing rapport. But sure enough, the COVID pandemic disrupted her tried and true practices, so she had to be nimble and think on her feet. She's a master at helping companies with large-scale transformations, including over 20 mergers and acquisitions. And she's worked with organizations both large and small, with projects spanning over 70 countries across multiple industries. Prior to establishing her own consulting practice, which is called Razor Sharp Consulting, get it? Briana spent 7 years honing her craft at Deloitte Consulting. So Briana, I'm very pleased to have you here. And Donald, so if Briana's done 70 countries, I don't even know how many you've probably consulted with.
Not that many.
But Donald's been in consulting for the last 25 years. As I mentioned, we worked together at PwC back in the last century. He's an expert at building trust, credibility, and rapport. And even before COVID-19, much of his work was done remotely. He tends to work with global clients to develop and implement major change initiatives that collectively span the business process value chain and cover all major functional areas. He's basically a big picture connect the dots guy. So he excels at assessing needs, linking, like I said, linking things together, connecting the dots, driving issues to the resolution, etc. Basically, he's the cavalry all in one person. Much of Donald's work's been international in scope, including projects in Europe, Asia, and South America. So the three of us have known each other a long time, and when the pandemic, I guess we made probably a few months into it, maybe even a couple months into it, Briana, you realized that, oh shoot, this is like totally different than anything we've had to deal with before. And you and Donald had worked together on a prior project, and you reached out to him, and that's sort of how this came to be. Can you tell us a little bit about even why we're having this virtual webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. So Liz, as you mentioned, Donald and I worked together on a project about 7 years ago. We had a really great partnership on that. So we've stayed in touch ever since. We are still working on finding another one to work on together. So hopefully in the very near future. And we were just catching up, and I want to say it was in the April-May timeframe. So we were a month or two into this. And we were just catching up on life. And, I'd mentioned that I had started a new project literally the day before everything shut down, and we were all sent to permanently work from home. And even though I've done some virtual work, as a Big Four alum, it was typical that you'd be on site several days a week and then, work remotely a day or two a week. But I'd never been fully remote. So Donald and I were just kind of brainstorming in that, because he tends to have, several clients at the same time. So he does a lot of work remote and kind of, puts things together. So we just started talking it through, and it was such a valuable conversation and One where you really helped me realize that things weren't as different as I thought they were. That, I felt like this was a conversation that other people were also having, things that, again, if you're used to delivering to your clients um, heavily in person, even if not full-time in person, there's definitely been a pivot where the in-person is off the table. So we thought it would be beneficial to share with other people our collective experiences.
Donald, anything to add to the story?
Yeah, what I would almost as an opening, two comments. Nearly everything any of us or any of the folks on the call have done in the past that's been helpful is likely still going to be helpful even in a virtual environment, right? We just have to name what it is, even if it sounds artificial, and then ask how it looks different or the same in this environment. So we're building on strengths, and that's something the three of us all believe in strongly. And then the second item is it's really about creating new relationships and then always building on relationships, not taking anything for granted, no matter how little or how much you know the relationship. And then ultimately, I find that as you create the relationship and build on the relationship, a lot of other things fall into place.
So I'm going to start with that, creating and then lead into the building, right? So particularly if you're working with a new client in this COVID world, right, virtual world, what are some of your tips or things you've discovered in terms of building credibility and trust?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why don't I go first briefly? I just started with a new client in July, and the two people I were interacting with, it was an integration after an acquisition. They had never met in person either, right? Because as they were preparing to meet in person, COVID had hit. And as I joined them, I just said, can we share a bit about each other? I mean, I just stepped into that space. I know we have an hour meeting with an agenda. I was foisted upon you, right, as your deal support. Let's talk about where you're at, how well you know each other, what your backgrounds are. And they were two very generous people. They just took that in stride, and we just built from there. And we made it a point that every 3-person call, me and the two of them, who were two in a box, we'd always share something briefly, nothing dramatic. We'd ask how our weekend was, etc. And we bonded very quickly because of that. So literally within 2 or 3 meetings, it was as if we have been working together for a while.
Because you took the time at the beginning, right?
Yes, yes. And we're clear about it. And they and no one expressed any concerns.
Briana?
I think I would add, again, because we are working from home, you're seeing a little bit of a window into people's lives. So, I've been on calls where a pet has popped into the picture, or with a client I worked with recently, her daughter would play piano every day at 4:30. So it kind of gave an entree to have a little bit of those personal moments where you could connect. Like you would if you were having lunch or coffee together in the office. But I think the challenge, and this is what I experienced at the beginning of that engagement, is, when when you have a meeting, it feels so formal that you have to be a little bit more deliberate about building those connections and allowing those organic conversations that would happen if you were in the same physical space to happen, in a more deliberate way.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's don't be shy, even though you may feel that, oh, this is a meeting, I should be focused on whatever we're supposed to be discussing. Feel free to step outside the box a little bit and, have those personal moments because you would have had them if you were in the office together.
Mm-hmm. One thing, Briana, you said that inspired me, in case anybody is saying, I'm on projects where people are very to the point, on task, go, go, go. What could I do? I'd catch them in the hall if I was in person. I'd see them in the parking lot. I'd do whatever. Well, what I've done historically, not just now, is I always look for a one-on-one, whether I make it 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and I've never been turned down. Like, let's have a weekly one-on-one if I'm in supporting you. And inevitably, right from the beginning, I make sure we're using some of that as a connection point at the beginning or the end. And I always be sure to remember something about them, even if it's a work connection, right, that I'm taking further, and not something, if they're not a person who shares personally, then inevitably they're going to share about work. So I'll ask them about when those last time they talked with the VP of sales or something, if they brought up before that sales was so critical. So just keeping that connection going allows you to build it quickly, even if it's only work related.
And Donald, that reminds me of a practice I used to do pre-COVID. Is the first time I started working with a client, within the first week, I'd say, you know, let's go have lunch, because I want to get to know you. I want to explain how I work. My working style is, you know, once you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. But if, you know, let's just connect. And I would explain over that lunch that, hey, I'm a single mom. I'm probably not going to be reachable between 4 and 8 p.m., but then you'll get emails from me at like 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. This is just the way I work. And so that's how I would always build rapport. But now, obviously, we can't get together so much for lunch. So I still encourage people to do a virtual cup of tea, or, you know, and do the same practice. It's just the method is different. Briana, do you have any tips for establishing rapport?
You know, I think the other one is, I'm just going to build on what the two of you said, is, you know, don't be shy about asking for time. I think, again, especially at the beginning of a project when people feel overscheduled, not everything has to be 30 minutes or an hour. Sometimes just grab 5, 10, 15 minutes. Like Donald said, I've never been turned down, especially if I'm like, hey, I'd just love to connect with you on this topic really quick. It's much easier to say yes to that than a meeting. So, you know, especially if there's a video tool, it feels a little more personal to see the person, even if you're not sitting across from them, than it does just to do a phone call or an email.
And Donald, Brianna just mentioned video tool, which makes me think of other tools. I know I'm going out of order than what we had discussed prior, but that reminds me of you were telling me last week about how you connect with, or sort of connect with your client's culture based on the type of communication tools that they use. Can you explain?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I have a client that is a big proponent of MS Teams, and they use the built-in icons into Teams to acknowledge in the chat that you get going, the posts that get going, as Team calls it. And so I observed for the first couple days at the most how they were responding, the tone of their response. Was it full sentences, partial sentences? I mean, I really paid attention to that and parsed it, when they used emoticons and when they didn't. And while nothing was perfect, I jumped in within about 48 hours. I mean, I didn't want to make a false step, but I was very conscious in a virtual environment to watch what they did. And I've run into people who don't do that right away. Again, it's all about work. And when they go to the virtual environment, they may struggle, and they forget that they do other things they don't give themselves credit for. So I'm confident everyone in this call has still had their EQ on, their alertness up. So now you've just got to translate it in other ways. The other thing that we've done there is they've started using, and in their case, again, it's Teams, but another client who used Google Docs, they pivoted to more interactive editing of work product. So here it is. And there was a norm, and it was interesting. We discovered how strong the norm was when another person joined our group. Do most of your edits as comments first. Hey, gee, Donald, what about if we change this opening section? Is the point strong enough? It doesn't feel strong enough to me. Should we consider this language? Whereas when a new person joined a couple months later, they just started editing the slides or the Word docs right in the Word doc. And the main client contact of mine said, what's up with this other person from my company who just joined us? Like, they're not paying attention to our norms. So she never even had a conversation with the Be Out norms with me, because I paid so much attention to her norms.
So I think that's something in the physical world that we would do just subconsciously, right? You pay attention to how are people dressing, how are they interacting, you know, all of those cultural cues that you get from walking around. And I think what I'm hearing you say, Donald, is you just have to make a conscious note to be extra alert.
Extra alert and intentional. So again, when you're consulting remotely, my experience is it's not just about the work product. Whereas in person, you can rely on your EQ and other things you do, as you're saying, semi-consciously or subconsciously. Virtual, you can't rely on that unless you make it more intentional.
So you mentioned focusing on the work product. Have either of you discovered that well, here's, I think, a misconception or a fear is that you're not there in the client's building or next to them. And I think some people are afraid that, you know, the consultant isn't working if you can't see them. So have you overcome that hurdle or challenge?
I think
Briana?
for me, I've just found I have to be over communicate, or what feels like over communicating, because normally, yeah, they would walk past and see you there with your laptop or see you in a meeting. If they walk past a conference room and they don't have that visual cue right now. So I found it's incumbent on me to what may feel like over communicate and just kind of constantly give updates of like, hey, my priorities for the day are this, or my priorities for the week are this. And then at the end of the week, recapping. On my last engagement, one of the things we did is we originally were having like a big marathon meeting at the end of the week for 2 hours to prep for the next week. In the end, we broke it into two and did kind of an end of the week meeting where we prepped for the next week and did a little catching up, and we divided the topics. So we had 2 formal touch points a week where we could talk about priorities, deliverables, and make sure that we were coordinating effectively. And on top of that, we also used, they used, was it Skype as their messenger? So, we were constantly back and forth over Skype. So I think that helped.
Yeah, similarly with me, and those who know me know that I never think of it as over communication because I'm just there, right? Communicating all the time. But I always find a way to talk with my client every day. So I don't go 2, 3, 4, 5 days where I'm working on a work product. Now, partly it's the nature of some of the work I do, but I would submit that any of us could do this. So you're sending them an email, or you're sending them a chat, or you're forwarding them a draft work product, or you're asking them, you're framing a complication and putting your recommendation in writing. It might have been a back and forth that you had in person before. I've been listening to the team, and I could see this, and I can already see that A or B would be better than C. And instead of saving that for your summary at the end of the week, or saving that for a key work product 2 weeks later, I always find a reason to talk to every single one of my main contacts. Because I do 2 or 3 or 4 at the same time, I'm talking to 2 or 3 or 4 different companies every day, even if it's as little as a 1-minute mini email or chat or voicemail or text.
So we have a question actually that came in on the chat, which is how have your work styles or processes changed as a result of being remote?
Yeah, Briana, this would be good for you because I watched Frank posted that, and you've already described, without naming them as work styles, several style changes you've had to make.
Yeah, so I think, again, I am more deliberate about communicating with my client. So again, initially it felt like I was pinging them a lot, but Donald helped shift my thinking to, it's just being really deliberate about being visible about what I'm doing. I've started asking for, I call them snack size meetings, these 5-10 minute, because there are times where there are things that just don't go as well back and forth over email. And there's times where it just is a benefit to get on the phone or get on a video conference for a few minutes and talk things through. It's more effective. And actually earlier today, I was just talking with someone, and I was talking about a tool I've used with someone I've worked with, where it's called Voxer, and you can leave voicemails for each other. So again, there are times where you pick up a nuance if someone's speaking that you wouldn't if they typed it out. And so especially if you're on a time zone difference and you want to not bother someone at an odd hour, there are ways to do that asynchronously where they can hear what you're saying without you calling them.
What's
so I'd also encourage tools like that.
What was the name of that tool, Briana?
Voxer.
All right, we'll publish that
on your phone.
We'll
it's kind of like
that in the notes.
Yeah.
And it does more than that. It's a tool. I was at a client that used it. It's a tool that can basically take your personal phone and have think of it almost as a virtual phone carved off within your phone. I know I'm saying that wrong for people who are IT aficionados, but it's you can have some separation between the two environments on the phone from that.
Well, and we've talked about last week when we were preparing for this, we were talking about other virtual tools, and there are some new ones on the market that make like virtual facilitation, but like one of them is called Mural, M-U-R-A-L. But Donald, you were telling me last week that you use some very old school tools like PowerPoint to facilitate in the moment. Can you?
Yeah, if I'm in person, I can't stop talking with my hands, and within 2 minutes, if I'm in a conference room, I have to uncap the dry erase markers, right? And so we and I know that's a reminder to shift to open Q&A in a moment. We set up a PowerPoint slide, right, that I just started writing on as they were taking notes. And I started playing with the images, and they wanted to, I'm sorry about that. They wanted to see how it would look in real time. I had to be comfortable pivoting to that. So if people are uncomfortable making PowerPoint edits in real time, it might be helpful. I drew a couple quick icons. I rounded rectangles are my favorite for speed. I did some text. I put some on one side and some on the other. And within like 4 minutes, it had evolved. And then one of the SVPs I was working with said, wait, this is all aiming down. And aiming down means like we're in a plane, we're going to crash, doesn't it? And I said, whoa, I was thinking we were getting from the superficial to the very granular. And she says, no, it looks like we're going to crash. And so I'm like, yes, ma'am. And I just pivoted. And within 30 seconds, the whole slide had been reoriented to going up and taking off. She's like, okay, I can live with this now. And imagine trying to not use a tool at all. I would have never known that and pulled that out of her. And if I made a giant formal slide later, I would have spent their time and money on something she didn't react to well.
And we did it when we were preparing for this this session today, right? We were together last week.
With Word.
I opened a Word document and I just started putting bullet points and moving sentences around. And you said, no, move that up there. And it was super easy. And I didn't have to learn how to use a new app, or I didn't have to get you guys to dial in, right? So yes, even the old tools work and our old methods work. We just have to think about using them in different ways. And I think that was one of the key themes that that the three of us discovered when we were talking about this last week, is that it's a lot of what our instincts are good. What we used to do still applies. We just need to think about how to do them a slightly different way. Okay, so with that, I think I have promoted everybody to be able to talk, with the exception of Michael Lane, because he is using an older version of Zoom. Sorry to call you out, Michael, but I have to promote you to panelist, which I just did. Now you'll be able to talk as well. So let's open this up for some just open forum Q&A, brainstorming and questions. Does anybody have any questions about, you know, maybe we didn't talk too much about establishing trust and credibility, right? Because particularly if you're working with a team, you have to be able to be perceived as credible and build trust quickly. And we didn't touch on that very much. So Briana, Donald, if you have any tips, and then we'll open it up to others.
I mean, this is one that I would say is very similar to how you would show up in person. I mean, if you make a commitment, deliver on it. And that's what's going to help you show you that you're a trusted partner to your client. So, you know, it's similar to what we talked about working styles. Again, I might just communicate more frequently than I did because I'm going to be in a different location than them. But I would, you know, or ask questions. And I think also don't be shy about asking questions. I know Donald talked a little bit about norms. There's times where you pick up on them. There's times where they're a little more subtle. So I think it's also don't be shy about asking a question if you don't know, you know, hey, can you just share, you know, how do you normally approach this? Or how do you prefer to receive deliverables? Do you want to do an iterative process, or do you want me to get 90% of the way there and then you review it? And I think just don't be shy about that because it'll make your relationship better if you just get those things out of the way up front.
And all I would add very briefly is, and this is going to sound artificial to some of you, create the opportunities. So when Briana says if or when, again, I try, you saw how I said I talk to them every day in some form. I'm creating the opportunity to mimic what I might have done or would have done in person. So I sometimes send pieces of a work product, but very focused. I have framing around it, or other opportunities. So when you do that, you're building commitments. They're tiny commitments. I'll get back to you by the end of the day with an update on that model. And it's only gonna be a partial update. Instead of saying in 3 days, I'll have the bigger model built for you. And I send them the partial update. The more you can have little touch points where you succeed every time, the more they're gonna have that confidence and you're gonna have that credibility built in.
That's an excellent point, Donald, is that because I know as consultants, we usually think about the deliverable, right? Or the big deliverable. And I love what your approach of doing little tiny pieces, because it establishes the frequent touch points. I think that's brilliant. So we did have a question come in via chat. How do you manage through silence during a call?
I was on a call yesterday with the group, and we built a norm. I facilitate them. They're monthly. They're supposed to speak up. We're global, and there's a group from India that once they get going, they will speak up, but they are waiting. There's almost like they're waiting for permission. And so the norm we followed into is once the guy from Spain and the guy from California have said their bit, because they always go first, if someone from India hasn't spoken up, I call them out by name, but I call out all three names, right? So Sunil, Rajesh, Venkat, I'm going to come to you in a sec. So I've given them a warning, right? Would love to hear what any of you might have to say. So I'm using subjunctive text on purpose. And inevitably they said, one of them butts in and says, thank you, Donald. They start and the other two follow. They just, in this company, with the microcultures of this company, I won't generalize it further than that, that's what's helped there. But I always give them a warning, and then I talk for another 5 seconds so that they don't feel on the spot.
As we manage a silence. We have time for one or two more questions. Here's another one. Has the virtual setting contributed to scope creep? So of course, scope creep being you've agreed to do A, B, and C, and all of a sudden now they're also asking you to do D, E, and F. Have you experienced any of that, Briana, scope creep?
I haven't. My last engagement was full-time, so they were kind of, interested in having me help them with a set of work. It wasn't as deliverable driven where it was like, I need these 3 things from you for this contract. It was more, we need your help for a period of time helping with this effort. So I haven't yet.
And I do, but I do on every engagement. It's just the nature of what I do. So a couple of weeks ago, they said, Donald, we have a little bit of room in the budget. We might switch to a giant transformation for Agile. Can you give us an hour a week to be a sounding board? Instead of saying, oh, a giant transformation to Agile from Waterfall requires 3 full-time change consultants, I said, sure, I'll be a sounding board for an hour a week. And they're recognizing they need more help. But I pivoted in the moment. I found it almost easier because they're very polite and courteous about it so far, at least with my clients. Whereas before they just assumed when it was in person that you could maybe do it. I know we only have a minute or so left, Liz. I'm curious if anyone, not that they have a question, but if anyone has a comment to make or maybe something they found that works really well that supplements anything the 3 of us have said. So I'd welcome any comment like that also.
So we did have something committed to the Q&A. Are you doing any in-person consulting or is it all remote?
Mine has been fully remote.
Mine's fully remote too right now.
Mine too. And has your client acquisition process changed as a result of remote work? And if so, how? Actually, I can answer that. I've been doing a lot more video. We're all doing more Zoom calls, but really what I'm doing is I've been reaching out to my network and saying, hey, you want to get together just to have a virtual cocktail? And my clients are like, yeah, or my prospective clients even, because we do it at 5 o'clock. I'm like, okay, bring your own drink. And we literally hang out like we would if we met for a cocktail. Most of the time we talk about what's going on in our COVID worlds and not so much about work. But in consulting, it's all about building and strengthening the relationship. And these video cocktails I'm having with these people are really strengthening the relationships because it's a chance for them to vent or to, just get things off their chest about, God, working at home with the kids and all of this. It's crazy. So yeah, my acquisition process has shifted, and I think it's much more effective. It's certainly more time effective for all of us because we don't have to drive. Donald, Briana, any other comments about getting new clients or business development?
I mean, I think similar to you, Liz, I've just been on video a lot more. So as I've been meeting with prospective clients, where in the past it might have been a phone call, now I think because everyone's so much more used to doing video conference, I'm doing a lot more over video. So it's nice to see the other person before we get to meet in person.
Yeah, and then somebody wrote in here, David wrote in, you could actually ship them the coffee and say, hey, let's get together for a virtual cup of coffee. I love that idea, but that means you have to have their address, and I only have work addresses for most of my people.
Yeah. But yeah. I love the idea. What I do further on that is if you have sort of a well-known boutique thing near you. So back when Pete's was smaller 30 years ago, I used to take Pete's if I went across country as an example, because I'm here from the Bay Area. And a lot of people hadn't heard of Pete's back then. So
And then we had a suggestion come in via the Q&A. Nancy says she makes a point of following up on anything a client says that indicates that they are having a personal difficulty so that they have a chance to air their concerns and get support. And it goes all about building that trusting relationship, right? So I think that's an excellent addition.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. In fact, I pay even more attention virtually almost to anything they say. One of my colleagues on this acquisition integration we're doing now just shared this morning with our main client contact, so-and-so yesterday from the comms team sounded like she had a really bad day. I inquired and she confirmed she had a really bad day. And she's on the Target Coast side. So by the way, you might want to keep an eye out for her, right? If people on Target Coast start to have really bad days, several days in a row or every week, are they a flight risk or not? And there was a good relationship. It wasn't talking out of turn, but in person, you may be so wrapped up in finishing something that you may or may not pick up on that. But virtually, even if you're audio only, you're going to hear the tone. You're really going to hear the tone because that's all or the body language. So
we all just need to up our EQ, so to speak, right? Be more, just maybe make a note for it, put it on your screen or whatever. Like, this is, be sure to listen, pay attention, or think, whatever it is, whatever your cue is. But we just need to be more conscious and intentional. Yeah. So with that, I knew we would blow through the 30 minutes awfully fast, which we did. But I just wanted to mention a little bit more about PICA. We'd love to have you join us. For those of you that are guests, join our community. Definitely reach out to us via picanetwork.org or reach out to me, Briana, Donald, if you have questions, because we're always here to help. We're all in it together. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and thanks everybody for joining, and especially thank you to Briana and Donald. As always, it's fun talking with you guys.
Thank you.
See you soon.